welcome to DNet, the Disability Network. I'm Susan Pettit-Crossman. The media, both print and broadcast, has not done a very good job of meeting the information needs of people with disabilities. The situation has improved somewhat in recent years, but in the meantime, that communication gap has been filled in part by specialized magazines and radio and television programs like ours. Later today, we'll discuss the role that's played by these forms of media. And almost everyone has bashed their fingers when using a hammer. Later on, we'll show you a hammer that avoids the swollen thumb problem altogether. It's one of many tools that have been created using the principles of universal design. First, here's this week's Disability News highlights. Ontario has a new employment equity law. It passed its third reading in the provincial legislature last week. Minister of Citizenship Elaine Ziemba claimed that Bill 79, the Employment Equity Act, will improve the lives of all working people in Ontario.
The purpose of this legislation is to provide equality of opportunity and equitable treatment for all groups in our society who have, for far too long, faced barriers to their equal participation in the workplace. And that is, Madam Speaker, Aboriginal people, people with disabilities, members of racial minorities, and women. But when it is implemented, Bill 79 will improve the working lives of all Ontarians.
Bill 79, she claims, is the most progressive Employment Equity Act of its kind in North America. But Liberal MPP Alvin Curling felt the legislation was far from ideal and failed to consider factors which make the workplace inaccessible for many people.
The disabled group have asked over and over that the transportation system, as a matter of fact, not only in the workplace, but coming to the workplace that they need transportation. So if this government feels that as employers are the one going to solve this employment equity and make it sure that all these people will be performing and things going to be wonderful and great, they have to work hand in hand with the fact of having proper transportation, proper daycare, proper education.
Conservative member Elizabeth Whitmer claimed that the government was trying to compensate for past sins rather than remove barriers.
It should remember that employment equity invokes removing barriers to employment for the designated groups, not creating new barriers for another group, white males.
Eric Schreier, Provincial Coordinator for Disabled People for Employment Equity, offered cautious support for the bill. He felt the legislation would provide principles which will move employers forward in employment equity. However, he thinks many important issues were unresolved. The organization will continue to work with the government to make improvements. Increases to federal pensions, supplements, and allowances kick in on January 1st. According to Minister of Human Resources Lloyd Axworthy, pensions will increase by 1.9%. The changes will affect many Canadians eligible for government benefits. Earlier this year, the Government of Alberta began trimming its assured income for the severely handicapped, or AISH program. But critics say people are being cut off from their disability benefits based on the opinions of bureaucrats, not doctors. Rick Boguski has the story.
For 27-year-old Derek Christensen, even a simple trip to the physiotherapist's office can be difficult. Christensen was born with arthrogryposis, clubbed hands, clubbed feet, and dislocated hips. It's meant a life filled with discomfort, and now it's about to get worse. Christensen has been told that at the end of December, he'll no longer be eligible for his monthly disability check, that the $810 he counts on for food and shelter will be gone.
I feel like a scapegoat, you know, like because of, they say they're running out of money. You know, it's just, I don't know. It's just a feeling you get that it's almost like a second-class citizen.
Currently, there are 15,000 people in this province on AISH, assured income for the severely handicapped. Right now, the government says it's reviewing each and every file in an effort to weed out those who might be trainable and available for work. Roberta Duvall is with the support group for the disabled. She says she's heard from hundreds of people who have been told they're losing their benefits.
What they're saying, in essence, is that these doctors don't know what they're talking about. We know better, so you're cut off.
Well, Social Services Minister Mike Cardinal wasn't available for comment today. He has said that the welfare reforms are his way of helping those most in need. Christensen has been trying to find work for years, but no one has been willing to hire him. He says he will appeal, but if he loses, he knows life is going to be a lot harder than it is now.
The Ontario government has made amendments to the Regulated Health Professionals Act. The new legislation will impose stronger penalties on doctors and health professionals who sexually abuse patients. They may lose their license for at least 5 years. The legislation also provides clear definitions of unacceptable behavior. That's this week's roundup of disability news highlights. When we come back, a look at magazines and other disability-related media. Recently, there has been an increase in media targeted towards an audience that includes people with disabilities. There are television shows like ITV's Link TV and the BBC's 1 in 4 broadcast in England. In the U.S., there are various cable TV channels, including America's Disability Channel, which is produced in Texas. In Canada, we have DNet and other local and regional television and radio shows. Magazines are increasing in numbers too. For example, there is Link in Australia, which covers a broad spectrum of stories, including updates on the latest technology and personal success stories. Mainstream is a cross-disability magazine published out of California in the States. It too tackles a variety of issues, including the debate over Jerry Lewis and his telethon. Disability Now offers a classified section for its readers. It's published in England. In Canada, we have several cross-disability publications, including the East Coast Ability Network, which reaches all readers with articles like Violence in Women. Disability Today from Ontario devoted a good deal of coverage to sports and disability. Ability Magazine's most recent issue featured an interview with our new Prime Minister, Jean Chrétien. Abilities magazine is published by Ray Cohen here in Toronto. The magazine is one element of the Abilities Foundation. Patrick Watson is the chairman for the foundation. Joining me now is Ray Cohen and Patrick Watson. Welcome to our show. Thanks for joining us. I'd like to start with you, Patrick. Why is it necessary for the disabled community to set up their own channels for communication and not be mainstreamed into
Well,
programming?
I think it's regrettable, but the fact is that disabled people in our culture have not yet been recognized as part of the mainstream, and there's a whole movement going on to cause that to happen. I hope that what we're in is a transitional period where not only for people with disabilities, for all kinds of special interest groups in this culture of ours, move through that position where they now are needing special advocacy and become recognized as part of the general population. And as the barriers go down, the distinctions become less and less visible. That has to do with racial differences and cultural differences, as well as differences in ability. I think we're moving in that direction, and the magazine that Ray publishes, Abilities Magazine, the work of the foundation, has as a kind of long-term goal, as part of the long-term goals, the normalizing of the experience of people with disabilities in the community.
Ray, I could turn this to you then, and as publisher of a specifically targeted group with the magazine Abilities, how do you feel about what Patrick has said?
Well, I would like to believe that, in fact, that ultimately is the truth, but our experience to date, so far, if the last 4 years are any example, is that the need for Abilities Magazine, and indeed for several other publications which have emerged since Abilities has come out, seems to be increasing. We've more than doubled our circulation. Our subscriber base continues to grow, and indications are that specialized media continues to be appreciated by people with disabilities, probably because of the lacking to date in mainstream media.
In a sense, it will always be so. You're going to have specialty channels on television for all kinds of interests, maybe one day a specialty channel for people with disabilities. But that doesn't counter the main thrust of trying to make society, trying to revise society's outlook so that people with disabilities become less and less visible.
One issue that came up about having targeted, programming or magazines or whatnot, any type of communications, is that the disabled community does know they can turn into a certain time, place, or once a month receive a specific piece of information that's going to assist them specifically. So is this a good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, I think it's a terrific thing, and I think that's ongoing. I think however far we achieve the normalizing of the experience of disabled people in society, we're still going to have a need for this kind of specialized information exchange.
I think one of the things that seems to be happening more and more is that mainstream corporations and institutions are taking advantage of the fact that publications such as Abilities and indeed shows such as DNet exist, and see them as being conduits by which to reach into a huge section of the Canadian population. And I think that that adds to the relevance of our efforts.
If we get back to mainstream communications then, back to their issue, why do they seem to have such difficulty integrating disability issues or stories or whatever? Is it the stigma attached or is it the economics?
Well, I don't think it's economics, and there may be a hangover or stigma. I just think it's acculturation. We are emerging, still pretty damn slowly, from the period where people with disabilities were kept out of sight. And in fact, there was a kind of shame attached to, oh, my cousin's a cripple. And, you know, all of the language that was associated with people who had disabilities is still, while suppressed, part of our culture. So it's a consciousness thing. It's a terrible old phrase out of the 60s, but it's a consciousness-raising thing, and we've made tremendous headway, but not enough.
No.
If you consider, you know, this is really the first generation of people with disabilities that in fact are an emancipated generation. It's really up until this generation that people with disabilities were locked away out of sight and out of the communities.
Yeah, and comparatively in Canada, we're doing very well, by the way. At Independence 92 in Vancouver last year, the number of people from overseas who just said, you don't know how blessed you are, looking at our facilities and our attitudes, was impressive.
Exactly. So if we look at Canada and disability and the steps that women and other groups like blacks, other minority groups have had to take, the disabled community is just at the beginning of their road, really, I imagine.
In many ways, I think that's true. And I think, too, the radical phase of the evolution is still one that's yet to unfold. And I think that specialized media will have a very, very important role to play for some time yet to come.
What's coming up for Abilities magazine?
We have our new Prime Minister saying some fairly good words about the relationship between the issue of people with disabilities and the issue of democracy itself, which is kind of what we're talking about here, the empowerment of individuals. And that's a main theme that Ray has been bringing to the surface in this magazine right from the beginning, the empowerment of individuals, making them part of the society with full capacity to participate socially and culturally.
I really want to thank both of you for coming in and speaking with me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Indeed.
Thank you for a chance to say a little bit more about this enterprise. We're both very proud of it.
Universal design is a concept that's been with us for a few years now. Every day we see examples of universal design. Ramps are used by mothers with baby strollers as well as by people who use wheelchairs. Automatic doors are invaluable to anyone with an armload of groceries. But what about small products, items that we pick up and use every day, like tools?
Wood, you can actually feel the texture, you can feel the grain.
I can now take off those shavings that I've taken off before. This device will suit a one-handed person just fine.
In his small workshop in Kingston, Ontario, Armando Delgobo works with an array of tools to create things like toys and clocks from wood.
Well, I decided to work with wood because of its texture, because of its nature. You know, wood, you can actually feel the texture, you can feel the grain, you can smell it, you can shape it in any way you want pretty well. And it really gives me a great satisfaction to be able to take a piece of wood such as this and shape it to the way I want it. I'm actually creating something and I can watch it develop right under my hands. My requirements are actually fairly simple to me, but I guess to manufacturers they're not. Well, things like when you have gauges, you know, some way of feeling, or you know, some kind of tactile marking. So it has positive stops as you go along at the different. It just clicks into position. You can't actually see it happening, but you can feel it happening. Again, everything that I do has to be tactile. This is a nail holder. Okay, the problem that I have is trying to hold the darn nail straight as I'm trying to hammer it. This thing does that for me, and after I have it started, I can just hold it back.
The nail holder is just one example of a universally designed tool that makes it possible for Armando to do his woodworking.
And just finish putting the nail in the rest of the way. Because now it's already straight, we don't have to worry about going straight anymore. Well, I suppose universal design, to my understanding, or the way I would like to see it, is tools and so on that are developed to meet everyone's needs. Not only myself, who is visually impaired or fully sighted, but someone who has poor movement in their hands and so on. And when it benefits myself, or it benefits everyone. Because if it's easier for me to use, then it's going to be easier for everyone to use.
For Armando and his family, the benefits are beautiful treasures, works of art.
Okay, this here is a hand-powered drill, I guess you could call it. It's a ratchet drill. As you squeeze the trigger, it turns. For people who have poor coordination in their hand or have arthritis who can't hold on to a regular screwdriver, which takes quite a bit of power to turn, and your wrist and so on. With this one, you can do it much easier. You just want to put in a couple of screws. Whoops. Got to get it started first. There we go. Okay. But if I don't want to do the squeezing motion, I can just lock that into position and just get a much better grip on it. We just, as a regular screwdriver sort of thing, rather than using the one with the very small handle on it. I think that the manufacturers have been fairly slow in coming up with these universal designs, because I suppose they felt that there was no market there for these type of tools, or very little market. But I think that now, with the aging population and so on, and people with disabilities wanting to do more and more things for themselves, I believe that some of the manufacturers are starting to see the benefits, the long-range benefits of having this type of design, universal design. And I think that's going to become more evident, at least it should become more evident in the near future.
I got into hand tool manufacturing because we couldn't find the types of tools that we wanted, so we had to design them ourselves.
Leonard Lee is the owner of Lee Valley, a leader in the manufacturing of high-quality hand tools. To him, universal design comes naturally.
Well, to me, universal design means to design something to suit the universe of people you're trying to serve, which would be the smallest among them, the largest among them, the weakest among them, and the strongest among them, to cover the universe as well as you could. And good design should cover a very broad range of sizes, strengths, and abilities. Our regular screwdrivers are designed so that they can be rotated without using a very powerful grip. If you take a handle like this one, for example, which is round. Now we're using this on a tool which is not used, which is not rotated in use. It's just there to provide something to grip. But many screwdrivers have a round handle. You have to grip them extremely tightly in order to get any torque on them. Whereas if the screwdriver is shaped like this one, say, which is triangular in cross-section, it's rounded on the corners. But that one, even if you don't have a great deal of strength in your hand, you can apply a substantial amount of torque to the screwdriver. The same with this one, which is oval in cross-section. Once again, when you hold that, you don't have to grip it very powerfully to be able to apply a fair amount of torque. Just with screwdrivers, round is wrong.
Well, I got banged up a little bit in the war and ended up with arthritis. Well, I think the Lee Valley tools, the carving tools especially, you can find just about anything you want to fit any deformity you have in, as far as your hands are concerned. As far as this one's concerned, they brought this one in from Korea somewhere, and the design of it takes in about 7 different tools for gardening, and you can use it for a longer time without being fatigued. I think it's ideal for a person like myself with arthritis. It's ideal for a person who has muscular deficiencies, whose grip might be not what it used to be. You can use these for a long time. Well, long time. It seems longer, without getting fatigued.
Many of his products are redesigned as a result of customer requests.
We have input from disabled craftsmen continuously. We have people writing to us all the time saying, you know, we're not all 19 years old with perfect eyesight and powerful limbs, and would you mind doing this or that with the product? So our customers are very quick to tell us ways we can improve product.
Okay, what I would like to be redesigned, I suppose, of most of the tools, but some of them that I use and I find the most difficulty with, one of them is the plane. The problem that I have with the plane is that if I want to square off this edge here, and, excuse me, I have no idea whether, I have no way of holding this straight. Okay, now I've made my own guide here by just clamping a piece of wood on the side, and by resting the plane up against it, it tells me I'm going straight. But if it had its own guide, which could follow along the side of the wood as you're going along, it would make it much easier to use.
This plane would help Armando to a limited extent. This plane was designed to hold the blade at exactly 90 degrees to the board. So you have a fence here that is exactly at 90 degrees to the cutting surface. You now can use it one-handed because this would be used on a pull stroke.
Now, flip it over, and there you go, here's a clock.
With one hand, like this, the hammer taken off, and then you continue to drive the nail like that. Using the foot pedal to open and close, you can come up, you can step on the pedal, have the vise open, close with your hip, hold it in position, then tighten the handle.
Okay, now do you see what I'm trying to get at here?
A good tool should be designed to be used with the least effort. When you make them easier for someone with weakened hands for whatever reason to use, they're just that much easier for someone with strong hands to use.
If you're thinking about buying tools for someone this Christmas, it's worth looking for products that are universally designed. We'll be right back. Tune in next week and the week after for our coverage of the Canada Summer Games, held this August in Kamloops, British Columbia. Next week's show highlights the work of the Access Committee for the Games. The week after, we'll focus on the athletes and the events. Tune in next week at the usual time. In 2 weeks, DNet will be broadcast on Saturday rather than Sunday on most CBC stations. Check your local listings. If you have any thoughts about today's show, write to us. That's our show. Merry Christmas from all of us at DNet. I'm Susan Pettit-Crossman. See you again next week. Now, here's our address. Disability Network, CBC, Box 500, Station A, Toronto, M5W1E6. This program is brought to you in part by the Centre for Independent Living in Toronto and the Canadian Association of Independent Living Centres.